The cavernous chamber hummed with a steady pulse, a rhythm synchronized to the heartbeat of the ancient cryostasis pod, nestled within the sterile containment bay. Pale blue light spilled softly from overhead panels, casting long shadows that flickered against the gleaming metal walls. The air was cool, infused with a faint scent of antiseptic mixed with the colder, sharper tang of preserved life, an aroma that was both clinical and hauntingly organic. Kryvar stood silently by the observation window, his multifaceted eyes narrowing as he regarded the figure suspended within the translucent casing. The pod's surface shimmered with frost, delicate crystalline patterns etched like frozen lace across its rounded contours. Inside, the human lay motionless, limbs relaxed in unnatural stillness, skin pale and smooth, contrasting starkly against the dark mesh of tubes and wires cradling him like artificial veins. For centuries, the Kytharian explorers had scoured the galaxy for remnants of lost civilizations, relics that whispered forgotten stories of beings long vanished. This was no ordinary discovery. The ancient was not only preserved in perfect stasis, but showed signs of remarkable vitality, a dormant vitality that beckoned curiosity and cautious hope. Kryvar's mind raced with the possibilities, the secrets locked within this archaic soldier's DNA, his mental frameworks, his very essence. Thexolin, the ship's chief scientist, adjusted the calibration dials on the console, his slender fingers dancing with precise movements. Commander Kryvar, the metabolic readings are stable. Neural activity is minimal but detectable. We can proceed with the awakening sequence. His voice was calm, almost clinical, yet carried an undercurrent of excitement. Kryvar nodded, his thoughts heavy with the weight of responsibility. Proceed. But remind me, once more, why we risk reanimating a member of a species extinct for centuries. Their history was violent, unpredictable. They were the architects of wars that reshaped star systems. Thexolin's eyes gleamed behind his translucent goggles. Precisely why we must understand them. Their combat strategies, their resilience. It may hold the key to advancing our own military protocols. Besides, the pod's inscriptions indicate this individual was a commander, a high-ranking soldier. His knowledge could be invaluable. The chamber filled with a low hum as the cryogenic seals retracted, and the temperature in the pod began to rise incrementally. Frost vapor hissed and curled like spectral smoke as it surrendered to the advancing warmth. Kryvar's gaze remained fixed, his mind drifting to the tales of human tenacity, legends woven into Kytharian lore through fragmented transmissions intercepted across light years. Suddenly, a faint pulse flickered beneath the man's eyelids, an almost imperceptible flutter of life beneath frozen stillness. Thexolin's fingers paused over the controls. He's responding. Minutes stretched into an eternity as the ancient soldier's chest rose, with shallow breaths. The sound raw and ragged, breaking the chamber's sterile silence like a whisper from the past. The rhythmic thud of his heart echoed faintly through the sensors, steady and unyielding. Kryvar felt a ripple of unease mixed with fascination. The human's presence was a living enigma, muscle memory and instinct locked in a body, untouched by time's decay. The question gnawed at him: what had the centuries of suspended animation done to this being? Had it diminished him, or transformed him into something altogether different? The pod's door finally parted with a hiss, and a gentle mist rolled away. Thexolin stepped back as the man's eyes opened, revealing irises the color of storm clouds, sharp and alert despite the long sleep. His gaze swept the chamber, assessing, calculating, an ancient predator resurrected into unfamiliar territory. Kryvar moved forward cautiously. "You are awake," he said, voice steady but measured. "I am Commander Kryvar of the Kytharian expedition. You have been in stasis for over 400 years. The man's lips parted, voice rough but commanding. Name's Diana Foster. Former Commander, United Earth Defense Forces. His words were clipped, each syllable deliberate, a soldier's discipline evident, despite the haze of disorientation. Kryvar exchanged a glance with Thexolin. The human's mind was active, his senses sharp. You will be studied for your knowledge and capabilities. Deanna's eyes flickered with a spark of defiance. I'm not some specimen to be dissected. Before Kryvar could respond, a faint tremor shook the chamber, subtle but unmistakable. The lights flickered, the hum deepened. Thexolin's console beeped urgently. Commander, external sensors detect unusual seismic activity nearby. Something is approaching. Kryvar's antenna twitched, tension coiling in his sinewy limbs. Deploy the security drones. Prepare defensive protocols. Outside the containment bay, the corridors of the starship thrummed with alert energy. Kryvar's mind raced, calculating threats, recalling historical data on human battlegrounds. The presence of the ancient human shifted the atmosphere, a living relic whose legacy was entwined with conflict. Diana struggled to rise, muscles stiff but responsive. Her years of training surged forth, commanding her posture, sharpening her focus. Where am I? What is this place? Kryvar stepped closer, careful not to intimidate. You are aboard the Kytharian vessel Vigilant. We found you preserved in cryostasis beneath the ruins of your homeworld. A flicker of disbelief crossed her face, quickly replaced by grim resolve. Then the war. It's been centuries. What's left to fight for? Kryvar hesitated, the weight of history pressing down. We seek knowledge. But there may be dangers yet. Your presence here alters everything. Outside, the seismic tremors grew stronger, reverberating through the ship's hull like distant thunder. Thexolin monitored the readings, fingers flying over controls. Origin unknown, approaching fast. Kryvar's gaze hardened. Prepare all units for possible engagement. We cannot afford to lose this opportunity. Deanna's eyes narrowed, a flicker of old instincts igniting. If you want to understand what makes humans strong, she said quietly, you'll need to understand how we survive. And sometimes, that means fighting where no one else dares. The chamber lights dimmed, shadows lengthening as the ship shuddered under the invisible assault. Kryvar felt the tension spike, a maelstrom of past and present converging in this sterile space. The ancient soldier before him was no mere relic. She was a key, a living cipher that might unlock secrets buried in both their histories. As the first warning sirens began to wail, Kryvar's mind locked onto a singular thought: the war was far from over, and this soldier, this human, would change everything. The sterile hum of the cryo chamber's cooling systems filled the dimly lit laboratory aboard the Kytharian vessel. Walls of polished alloy reflected the cold blue glow of interface panels, their light casting long shadows over the countless cables and blinking consoles. The air was heavy with the scent of antiseptic, mingled with the faint metallic tang that permeated every corner of the ship's scientific hub. It was a place where science and silence reigned, yet beneath that quiet, something was stirring. Kryvar stood motionless before the translucent cryopod, his multi-jointed limbs folded neatly at his sides. His compound eyes, dark and multifaceted, flickered with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Thexolin's voice had just ceased its steady drone, the alien scientist standing to one side, eyes bright with excitement. They had just completed the final deactivation of the stasis field enveloping the human inside, and now the ancient sleeper lay exposed, no longer frozen in time but awakening. Diana Foster's first breath came ragged and shallow, a soft hiss escaping her lips as her lungs filled with the lab's recycled air. To the untrained observer, she seemed fragile, almost brittle, a relic from a forgotten era. But Kryvar knew better. He had witnessed countless Kytharian soldiers waken from stasis, aged, weak, disoriented, but Diana's presence resonated differently. There was a spark, a defiant heartbeat beneath her pale skin, that defied the centuries she had spent locked away in frozen slumber. The room was silent except for the soft mechanical hiss of the pod's lid sliding open. Thexolan stepped back, revealing the human commander sitting upright, eyes scanning the alien environment with a sharpness that belied her apparent frailty. Kryvar felt an unexpected jolt of something unfamiliar. A prickle of apprehension, perhaps. His species had never encountered a specimen like this before. The first moments of awakening were a fragile bollet. Diana's limbs trembled as she flexed her fingers and toes, the sensation of movement unfamiliar yet strangely invigorating. Her vision, adjusting to the dim light, took in the sterile walls, the shimmering holographic displays, and the curious faces of the Kytharians who surrounded her. She did not speak, nor did she ask for explanations. There was an unspoken understanding. Her mind was racing, cataloging everything, assessing the situation with the precision of a soldier trained for battle. Kryvar observed every subtle twitch of her muscles, every controlled breath, every blink that betrayed the strain of sudden consciousness. What fascinated him most was the resilience that radiated from her, the slow but unmistakable gathering of strength, as though centuries of suspended animation had not dulled her, but sharpened her resolve. Thexolan's voice broke the silence once more, his tone tinged with awe. "Commander Foster, we have questions. Your species was thought extinct, lost to time. Yet you awaken, seemingly unharmed." Diana's gaze met his, unwavering. "I am what remains. What endures?" A shiver passed down Kryvar's carapace. He had heard this phrase before, in old Kytharian war legends, spoken of warriors who transcended limitations through sheer will. But here, it was not myth. Days passed in a blur of tests and analysis, a symphony of scientific procedures that sought to unravel the mystery of the human's endurance. The Kytharian medics monitored her vitals, noting the extraordinary stability of her cardiovascular system and the rapid regeneration of muscle tissue. Thexolan focused his studies on cellular regeneration, his instruments revealing patterns of biochemical activity that defied Kytharian understanding. Yet it was not the scientific data that intrigued Kryvar most. It was the moments between, the quiet intervals when Diana moved beyond the confines of the lab, venturing through the ship's corridors. There, she walked with a steady, measured pace that seemed to command the very gravity beneath her feet. Her senses, attuned to the faintest sound or flicker of light, spoke of a heightened awareness forged through years of survival. One evening, Kryvar found himself trailing her down a narrow passageway, watching as she paused before a viewport. Outside, the endless expanse of the galaxy stretched into darkness, punctuated by distant stars that burned cold and indifferent. Diana's eyes reflected that starlight, deep and piercing. "I survived because I adapted," she said softly, her voice carrying a quiet strength. "Because I refused to surrender to time." Kryvar nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling within him. For the first time, he glimpsed the essence of what the Kytharian army had never understood about humans. Their endurance was more than physical, it was spiritual, an unyielding defiance against oblivion. The turning point came unexpectedly during a simulated combat exercise designed to test Diana's capabilities. The Kytharian trainers had set up an intricate obstacle course beneath the artificial gravity dome, filled with hazards meant to challenge coordination and stamina. Marcus Torres, a younger human soldier recently awakened from a similar cryogenic state, accompanied her. The atmosphere was tense, filled with the low murmur of machinery and the distant thrum of the ship's engines. The air smelled faintly of ozone and heated metal, charged with anticipation. As the exercise commenced, Diana moved with a fluid grace, her every step deliberate, her reflexes honed by an instinct that seemed almost preternatural. Suddenly, an unforeseen disruption occurred. A malfunction in the environmental controls triggered a rapid influx of artificial fog, obscuring vision and dampening sound. The fog swirled, thick and clammy, clinging to skin and armor alike. Visibility dropped to near zero, and a hush fell over the observers. Marcus faltered, his breaths ragged as panic brushed the edges of his mind. But Diana, undeterred, pressed forward. Her hands found his arm, steadying him, her voice a calm anchor amid chaos. "Focus on my voice. Trust your senses." In that moment, Kryvar witnessed something extraordinary. Diana's body moved with a relentless rhythm, muscles contracting and releasing with uncanny efficiency. She navigated the fog-shrouded course, as though guided by some internal compass, her endurance unyielding despite the oppressive atmosphere. Hours seemed to compress into minutes as the exercise unfolded, the fog thickening then dissipating under the influence of the dome's filtration system. When it finally cleared, Diana and Marcus stood at the finish line, breathless but unbroken. Kryvar approached cautiously, a mixture of respect and disbelief coloring his every step. "Your endurance surpasses expectations." Diana's gaze met his, steady and resolute. "We endure because we must. Because giving up is not an option." In the days that followed, more revelations emerged. The Xulans' research uncovered that the cryogenic stasis, far from being a mere preservation method, had triggered an unexpected evolution within the human genome. Genetic markers associated with resilience, healing, and adaptability were activated at unprecedented levels. Time, which usually eroded strength and vitality, had instead become a crucible forging something greater. Kryvar's mind raced with the implications. The Kytharian soldiers he commanded were formidable, trained in the art of war from birth. Yet here was a species that defied the natural order, their bodies and minds tempered by time itself. It explained the ancient legends whispered among his people, the tales of humans who had fought wars that spanned centuries, who refused to die, even when the world around them crumbled. But there was more, something deeper, more profound. Diana's presence on the ship was a living testament to a truth the Kytharians had long ignored. That strength was not solely measured by the weapons one wielded or the battles one fought, but by the will to endure when all seemed lost. As Kryvar stood once more before the cryo-pod, now empty and silent, he reflected on the morbid stories he had heard from his soldiers. The whispered superstitions about human graveyards, tales that no Kytharian warrior would dare challenge the restless spirits that lingered near those hallowed grounds. For the first time, it made sense. The endurance of the human spirit transcended even death, and their presence near such sites carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. The laboratory's glow dimmed as the ship's artificial night cycle began, casting long shadows that danced across cold metal surfaces. Kryvar allowed himself a rare moment of introspection. The discovery of Diana Foster was not merely a scientific breakthrough. It was a revelation that challenged the very foundation of Kytharian understanding about life, death, and what it truly meant to fight. In the quiet that followed, the commander made a silent vow. He would learn from these ancient warriors, honor their resilience, and perhaps, just perhaps, understand why Kytharian soldiers refused to fight near human graveyards. Because it was not fear alone that held them back, but a profound respect for the endurance of those who had come before. And in that respect, Kryvar found a new kind of courage. The Kytharian war room hummed with a low, persistent vibration, the pulse of the massive starship navigating the cold void. Its walls, sleek and obsidian, absorbed the dim blue glow from embedded holo panels that displayed star charts, terrain scans, and tactical readouts. Kryvar stood by the expansive viewport, arms crossed, eyes narrowed as he contemplated the latest reports. Outside, the swirling nebulae stretched in endless hues of violet and teal, distant constellations flickering like ancient sentinels. Yet, the commander's mind was anchored not in the wonders of the cosmos, but in the enigma that was Diana Foster. Since her awakening from centuries of cryogenic slumber, Diana had confounded every prediction the Kytharian scientists crafted. Vexolan's initial fascination with her biological resilience had transformed into an uneasy respect for her mental acuity. But it was something more, something subtle yet unmistakable, that had begun to unsettle Kryvar. The human's tactical intuition was not merely a product of training or evolution. It felt primordial, woven into their very essence. That morning, the Kytharians had dispatched a reconnaissance team to a contested zone near an ancient human graveyard on the planet Veritas IV. The area was thick with the scent of damp earth and decayed foliage, the air heavy with the memories of lives long past. Lush greenery tangled around weathered headstones carved from stone that had resisted centuries of erosion. Tiny motes of dust danced in shafts of filtered sunlight, illuminating the solemn quiet except for the distant rustling of leaves and the occasional call of native birds. The Kytharian soldiers were uneasy, their multi-jointed limbs tense with anticipation. They had been ordered to take strategic positions near the burial grounds, a decision Kryvar had reluctantly approved. Human soldiers, however, refused to enter that space, citing profound cultural taboos that seemed alien to their Kytharian counterparts. Yet, as the skirmish erupted, it became clear why. The battle began suddenly, a jagged crackle of energy weapons slicing through the air. Enemy forces materialized from the dense underbrush, their movements swift and silent. The Kytharian soldiers responded with practiced precision, their plasma rifles blazing in bursts of cobalt light. Yet, something shifted when the humans engaged. Marcus Torres, a young but battle-hardened human soldier, exhibited a fluidity of motion that was almost preternatural. His eyes flicked rapidly, assessing angles and trajectories, anticipating enemy maneuvers before they happened. Kryvar observed through the squad's tactical feed, the holographic display overlaying Marcus's movements with data streams. The human's reflexes were lightning fast, but more than that, his decisions defied conventional logic. He abandoned cover at moments when all metrics screamed caution, then reappeared in unguarded flanks with unerring accuracy. Enemy units found themselves herded into traps they hadn't foreseen, their formations crumbling like sandcastles under an incoming tide. The air crackled with tension and the acrid scent of burnt circuitry. Marcus's squad was pinned near a ruined mausoleum, the cracked walls stained with lichen and the residue of ancient wars. The human raised his rifle briefly, then dropped it, drawing a simple combat knife with a blade polished to a mirror sheen. His movements became a dance of shadows and violence, silent, precise, and devastating. Kryvar's mind raced. This was not instinct, but something deeper, something embedded in the human psyche. The tactical intuition exhibited was not merely learned expertise. It was as if Marcus were communing with an unseen force, a primal awareness of battlefield flow that transcended training manuals or simulations. The Vexolan, monitoring from the adjacent station, finally broke the silence with a low murmur. "Commander, the human neural scans indicate heightened activity in regions I cannot fully identify. It's almost as if their subconscious is interfacing directly with their sensory input." Kryvar's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "It is beyond our technology to fully interpret, but the data suggests that humans access a latent cognitive map, an instinctive grasp of spatial and temporal variables that allows them to anticipate enemy behavior with remarkable accuracy." The commander exhaled slowly, the weight of this realization settling over him like a thick fog. The Kytharians prized logic, calculation, and order. Yet here was a species whose battlefield prowess emanated from an ancient, almost mystical wellspring of awareness. It explained their refusal to fight near their own graveyards. The sacred grounds bolstered their connection to this tactical intuition, a connection that the Kytharians could neither understand nor replicate. Outside, the skirmish raged on. Marcus, sensing an opportunity, led his squad through a narrow pass flanked by towering stone markers, etched with names and dates long forgotten. The very air seemed charged, alive with the memories of ancestors whose silent watch guided his every move. Enemies surged forward, but Marcus anticipated their every thrust, parrying and countering with lethal grace. Suddenly, a Kytharian sniper positioned atop a ridge was caught off guard. His laser pulse rifle sputtered as a stray bolt from enemy fire struck the weapon's energy cell. The soldier's limbs jerked involuntarily, and he tumbled backward, landing hard on the rocky ground. His breaths came ragged and panicked. Marcus, noticing the plight of his ally, darted forward. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and scorched earth. Without hesitation, he slid beside the fallen Kytharian, pressing a med kit into the wound. The enemy was closing in, but Marcus's gaze remained steady, his hands steady and sure. The battlefield tempo shifted as Marcus's squad rallied around him. Their movements became a symphony of coordinated strikes and evasive maneuvers. The Kytharian soldiers, inspired by the humans' fearless resolve, found themselves shedding their usual rigid discipline for a more fluid, adaptive style. It was as though Marcus's tactical intuition was contagious, a beacon guiding them through the chaos. Kryvar felt an unfamiliar stir within himself, a gnawing admiration laced with unease. The ancient human was not merely surviving the crucible of combat, he was transcending it. The noble ideals of strategy and honor that Kryvar had been raised on felt fragile and incomplete when faced with such raw, instinctual genius. As the last foes retreated into the jungle's shadows, the battlefield fell silent except for the ragged breathing of the victors. The scent of smoke mingled with the earthy aroma of crushed leaves and disturbed soil. Marcus stood amidst the ruins, his chest heaving, eyes scanning the horizon, as if communing with unseen spirits. Kryvar's communicator buzzed softly. The Xolan's voice crackled through with a single, somber observation. "Commander, we must reconsider our tactics. The human's connection to their ancestral memory is an intangible asset, one that no technology can replicate." The commander nodded, his gaze lingering on the distant graveyard. The solemn rows of headstones, the whispers of countless generations etched into stone, were more than mere markers of death. They were sanctuaries of insight, reservoirs of tactical wisdom that humans tapped into instinctively. A profound silence settled over Kryvar as he absorbed the weight of this second revelation. The first had been about human endurance. This was about their mind. A wellspring of tactical intuition flowing from a deep, almost spiritual bond with their past. The Kytharian soldiers' refusal to fight near those sacred grounds was not mere superstition. It was respect, acknowledgement that some forces transcended physical might and technology. The commander felt the cold breath of humility brush against his thoughts. Perhaps the key to victory was not in imposing alien logic upon the battlefield, but in embracing the enigmatic power of instinct, memory, and ancestral legacy. He turned from the viewport, the holo, displays reflecting in his multifaceted eyes. The war was no longer just a contest of strength and strategy. It was a confrontation with the profound mysteries locked within the human soul. Kryvar's mind raced with questions. Could the Kytharians learn to honor such mysteries? Could they forge an alliance not just of arms, but of shared reverence for the unseen forces that shaped warriors across the stars? As the stars wheeled overhead and the nebulae shimmered silently, the commander resolved to uncover the depths of this human enigma, to understand why Kytharian soldiers refused to fight near human graveyards was to glimpse the very heart of what made humans formidable. And perhaps, to glimpse a path toward a new kind of strength, born from respect and understanding. The battle was won, but the true revelation had only just begun. The air in the subterranean chamber was thick with a metallic tang. A lingering scent of ozone mingled with the faint musk of ancient stone. Kryvar stood motionless, eyes fixed on the flickering holographic map that floated between him and Thex Olin. The dim light cast long shadows across the walls, etched with the scars of countless experiments and battles. Yet, despite the sterile environment, there was an undercurrent of something far less tangible, something ancient and implacable, like a heartbeat echoing beneath the sterile veneer of science. The third revelation had come quietly, far from the clash of weapons or the sterile hum of laboratory instruments. It had arrived in the form of an old battlefield, a human graveyard sprawling across a shattered plain beyond the Kytharian outpost. Thex Olin had insisted on accompanying Kryvar, driven by a mixture of scientific curiosity and an unspoken need to understand. The human soldiers, led by Diana Foster and Marcus Torres, had been hesitant but resolute. No Kytharian entered the area without human consent. As they stood on the cracked earth, the wind whispered through the skeletal remains of what had once been a bustling war zone. Rusted fragments of armor, shattered weaponry, and toppled monuments lay half, buried beneath a blanket of wildflowers and ash-colored dust. The scent of damp soil mixed with faint traces of burnt ozone, evocative of energy weapons discharged centuries ago. The landscape was both desolate and strangely vibrant, a paradox that unsettled Kryvar more than he admitted. Diana's presence was a constant reassurance amidst the eerie quiet. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, scanned the horizon as if reading a story written in the scars and relics around them. Marcus, silent but steady, moved with the practiced grace of a soldier who had seen too many battles yet refused to surrender to despair. Kryvar's attention, however, was drawn not to the relics but to the subtle hum in the air. A vibration almost imperceptible, like the faint pulse of an unseen engine. It was not a natural resonance, but one born of memory and will. Thex Olin, ever the scientist, explained it as an emergent bioelectric field, a phenomenon human physiology might generate in response to collective trauma and resilience. Yet Kryvar felt it as something deeper, something woven into the very fabric of human existence. Thex Olin's voice was low, almost reverent. This place, it is not merely a graveyard. It is a testament, a monument to unyielding unity. These humans, even in death, have forged a bond that transcends the corporeal, a network of shared resolve and memory that fortifies their kind. Kryvar studied the worn gravestones, each etched with names and dates, some accompanied by cryptic symbols unfamiliar to Kytharian script. He felt an unfamiliar stirring within, a knowing respect intertwined with a cautious unease. The human dead were not silent, they whispered in the language of pain, sacrifice, and unbreakable camaraderie. Without warning, the earth trembled beneath their feet, a low rumble that echoed through the valley. Kryvar's instincts screamed, a warning honed through countless campaigns. From the shadows between shattered monoliths, hostile silhouettes emerged, moving with a predator's precision. The enemy had found them. The atmosphere thickened, charged with the imminent surge of violence. Diana's hand went to her sidearm, a sleek fusion of alloy and plasma. Marcus slid beside her, weapons drawn and ready. Kryvar's claws flexed, senses sharpening as ancient battle instincts surged through his veins. But something restrained him. A silent acknowledgement of the sacred ground beneath them. The enemy advanced swiftly, their armor glinting dully beneath the overcast sky. Their movements were coordinated, deadly, a blur of calculated strikes and evasive maneuvers. The battlefield erupted into chaos, a ballad of fire and steel set against the haunting backdrop of the human graveyard. Kryvar moved with lethal grace, every strike precise, every evasion instinctive. Yet, as the fight unfolded, he noticed subtle shifts, an almost rhythmic pattern in the way human soldiers fought. Diana and Marcus moved not as individuals, but as extensions of one another, their coordination seamless, their trusts evident without spoken word. The human squad formed a near, impenetrable shield, their unity a living force that repelled the enemy's advances. Amid the barrage of plasma bolts and energy blades, Kryvar sensed the graveyard's latent power awakening. The bioelectric hum intensified, weaving through the air like invisible threads binding the living and the dead. The enemy faltered, confusion flickering across their faces as if the very ground beneath them resisted their presence. Kryvar's mind raced. This was no mere coincidence. The graveyard was a crucible of human will, a nexus where memories of sacrifice and loyalty coalesced into a force tangible enough to influence the outcome of battle. The dead, intertwined in eternal unity, lent strength to those who fought to protect their legacy. Olin's earlier words echoed in Kryvar's consciousness. A network of shared resolve and memory. It was a revelation that challenged Kytharian understanding of warfare and honor. Here, death was not an end, but a continuation, a binding thread that wove generations of warriors into an unyielding tapestry. As the last enemy fell, silence reclaimed the battlefield, broken only by the ragged breaths of the survivors and the distant whisper of the wind. Diana lowered her weapon, her gaze sweeping over the fallen and the shattered terrain. Marcus knelt beside a battered gravestone, tracing its worn inscription with a reverence that transcended words. Kryvar's chest rose and fell steadily, his mind grappling with the profound implications. This was why Kytharian soldiers shunned fighting near human graveyards. Not out of superstition, but because of the intangible force that surged there, a force born of unyielding unity and eternal remembrance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, Kryvar felt a shift within himself. A newfound respect for the human spirit, a recognition that their strength was not solely in muscle or technology, but in the bonds that death could not sever. The third revelation was not just about understanding, it was about embracing a truth that transcended species, a truth that would forever shape the way Kytharians viewed their human allies and foes alike. The graveyard, once a silent testament to loss, had become a beacon of resilience and unity, its echoes guiding the living through the darkest of battles. And Kryvar, standing amidst the tombstones and wildflowers, vowed to carry that lesson forward. For in the unyielding unity of human warriors lay a power that even the stars could not diminish. The dusk settled upon the desolate field like a heavy shroud, casting long shadows that intertwined with the twisted silhouettes of the ancient headstones. The moon had not yet risen, leaving the graveyard cloaked in a silver, gray haze that blurred the edges of the weathered stone markers. A faint wind whispered through the cracked slabs, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and decay, mingled with something sharper, metal, sweat, and impending violence. Kryvar's mandibles clicked softly in agitation as he surveyed the terrain from his crouched position behind a toppled monument. The Kytharian commander's multifaceted eyes shimmered faintly in the dim light, catching glimmers of the scattered moonbeams soon to emerge. Every instinct screamed caution as he absorbed the eerie stillness of the place. The very ground seemed laden with memories that pulsed beneath the surface, silent yet potent. The battlefield was a ruined human graveyard, a place the Kytharian soldiers had long avoided in battle. Yet here they were, forced into this forsaken field by circumstances beyond their control. The enemy, a ruthless faction of Zelvarn mercenaries, had taken aim at this strategic choke point. For Kytharian forces, this was a test not only of strength, but of will. Kryvar's thoughts flickered back to Ulin's grim warnings, his voice echoing faintly in memory. Beware the human graveyards. Their dead linger with a force unlike any other. At the time, the notion had seemed a superstition born of xenophobia or misunderstanding. Now, in the oppressive quiet, Kryvar understood. There was an energy here, an imperceptible but palpable weight that pressed against his senses. He adjusted his grip on his pulse rifle, the cool metal vibrating faintly with suppressed power. Around him, the other Kytharian soldiers mirrored his caution, their armored forms blending into the shadows. Between the tombstones, the human soldiers moved with a peculiar grace, their footsteps nearly silent despite their heavy gear. At their center, Diana Foster stood resolute, a beacon of calm amid the storm. Kryvar noted the way her eyes scanned the field, alert and calculating. Marcus Torres, her right-hand soldier, kept close, muscles coiled and ready. The humans here defied expectation, not fragile relics of a bygone era, but warriors honed by centuries of endurance, an echo of the ancient power hidden beneath their skin. Suddenly, a distant crack shattered the silence, followed by the sharp rattling of gunfire. The Xelvarn mercenaries had spotted them. Kryvar's pulse quickened as the first salvo tore through the graveyard, shattering a nearby headstone and sending shards of stone into the air like deadly splinters. The battlefield erupted in chaos. Kytharian soldiers surged forward, their movements precise and lethal, weaving between the graves with practiced ease. The air filled with the staccato rhythm of energy weapons and the guttural cries of combat. Yet beneath the cacophony, Kryvar sensed an undercurrent, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, as if the very spirits buried beneath the soil lent strength to the human fighters. He watched as Diana ducked behind a mausoleum, her rifle blazing in controlled bursts. Each shot found its mark, each movement fluid and assured. Marcus vaulted over a broken gravestone, dodging enemy fire with unnatural agility, before unleashing a grenade that exploded in a fiery bloom, scattering the mercenaries. The Kytharian soldiers pressed the advantage, but the enemy fought back with brutal tenacity. Kryvar found himself locked in a fierce duel with a towering Xelvarn warrior, their weapons clashing in sparks and snarls. The mercenaries' blades struck hard, but Kryvar's reflexes, sharpened by centuries of genetic resilience, allowed him to parry and counter with a devastating jab. As the duel raged, Kryvar became acutely aware of the surroundings. The graveyard was not merely a backdrop, but an active participant in the battle. The cracked stones seemed to hum with latent power. When a mercenary fell, the ground beneath their body emitted a soft glow before fading, as though the earth itself acknowledged their defeat. Kryvar's mind raced. Thexolan's research had hinted at a unique human biology, one enhanced by prolonged suspended animation, a synergy with ancestral memories and the land that nurtured them. Here, in this sacred ground, that synergy reached its pinnacle. He glanced toward Diana once more. She was no longer simply a soldier, she was a force of nature. With uncanny precision, she dispatched enemies with a combination of brute strength and tactical genius. Her eyes burned not with fear or hesitation, but with an unwavering resolve that seemed to draw from the very soil beneath her feet. The battle swelled, and the graveyard's influence became undeniable. Kytharian soldiers found their senses sharpened, reflexes heightened. The oppressive weight that had once threatened to suffocate their will now fueled their determination. Yet, the humans seemed to harness it with an ease and familiarity that bordered on reverence. Kryvar's thoughts drifted to the centuries, old graves around him. The silent witnesses to lives long ended yet somehow enduring. The human dead were more than bones beneath stone, they were sentinels of a legacy that refused to fade. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the graveyard, throwing Kryvar off balance. The earth trembled as a Xelvarn siege engine unleashed its fury. Tombstones shattered, dirt exploded skyward, and a cloud of dust engulfed the combatants. The acrid smell of burning ozone and smoldering rock filled the air, stinging Kryvar's sensory membranes. But amidst the chaos, something extraordinary happened. From the rubble emerged human soldiers, their forms encased in a faint, shimmering aura. Their eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light, and their movements defied the limits of normal human capability. They struck down enemies with a ferocity and speed that seemed supernatural. Kryvar's jaw tightened. This was the essence of what Thexolan had described. Humans awaken not just in body, but in spirit, their ancient strength rekindled by the sacred soil of their ancestors. He rallied his troops, signaling for a coordinated advance. The Kytharians surged forward, side by side with the human warriors. The graveyard, once a place of solemn peace, had become a crucible of fury and resilience. The clash intensified. Energy beams sliced through the night, illuminating the twisted faces of soldiers locked in mortal combat. The scent of scorched earth mingled with the metallic tang of blood, and the guttural cries of the wounded echoed among the tombstones. Kryvar's duel with the Zelvarn adversary reached its crescendo. With a final, decisive strike, Kryvar drove his blade through the mercenary's chest. The enemy fell, eyes wide with disbelief, before crumpling to the ground. Breathing heavily, Kryvar surveyed the battlefield. The Zelvarn forces were breaking, their formations crumbling under the combined onslaught of Kytharian and human warriors. The graveyard's silent power had turned the tide. Yet Kryvar understood that victory was not merely a matter of weapons or tactics. It was a reckoning with history, with the unyielding spirit of a species that refused to be extinguished. As the first rays of dawn pierced the horizon, casting a pale gold light over the shattered gravestones, Kryvar felt a profound respect for the humans before him. Their strength was not solely physical, but born from a connection to their past, a legacy etched into the very earth they fought upon. The battle was won, but the true victory lay deeper, in the revelation that some places, some dead, held power beyond comprehension. And for the Kytharians, that meant never again underestimating the battlefield of human graveyards. Kryvar lowered his weapon, the weight of exhaustion and awe settling upon him. Around him, the sounds of the living mingled with the whispers of the dead, weaving a tapestry of life and memory that transcended the war. In that moment, amidst the broken stones and fading shadows, Kryvar understood why Kytharian soldiers refused to fight near human graveyards. Not out of fear, but out of reverence for a force that transcended time, a force that could turn the tide of any battle. The graveyard was more than a resting place. It was a testament to resilience, a beacon of power, and a silent guardian of humanity's unyielding spirit. And Kryvar, once skeptical, now carried that truth with him, etched not in stone but in the very marrow of his being. The valley lay quiet beneath the fading dusk, a tapestry of shadows stretching long across the worn stones, and twisted roots that marked the ancient human graveyard. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and the faint, metallic tang of lingering energy fields, remnants of battles long past, etched invisibly into the soil by human technologies and their indomitable wills. Kryvar stood at the edge of this solemn place, his many eyes fixed on the horizon where the last light blood from a bruised sky. The wind whispered through the gnarled branches overhead, carrying with it a fragile serenity that felt painfully at odds with the violence that had so recently threatened to shatter it. The Kytharian soldiers, once bristling with eager fervor, now moved with deliberate caution, their armored forms blotting out the dying light as they maintained a respectful distance from the burial ground. None dared to tread too close. This was no mere battlefield, it was hallowed ground, an echo chamber reverberating with the legacy of a species that had defied time-death, and the cold void itself. In the center of the valley, Diana Foster knelt beside a shattered monument, her gloved fingers tracing the fractured insignia worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. Her breath, clouded in the chill evening air, fogged briefly before dissipating, a quiet testament to her still beating heart. The weight of the centuries pressed upon her, but it was not the weight of despair. It was the weight of legacy, of endless struggle and survival. Her mind replayed the moments leading to this uneasy peace. The clash of wills. The sudden burst of raw human resilience that had shattered Kytharian expectations and forced them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about their ancient adversaries. Kryvar's voice was a low rumble, thoughtful and restrained as he approached, careful not to break the fragile silence. "It is as Thexolan surmised," he said. "The humans do not merely inherit strength from their ancestors, they embody it. Their very existence is a bridge across epochs, an unbroken thread of defiance woven through time." Diana looked up, her eyes reflecting the dimming light and something far older. Recognition, perhaps, or the weight of shared history. "They don't fight for territory or power," she said softly. "They fight to honor those who came before. Each grave, each marker, it's more than a resting place. It's a reminder, a promise. They carry their past as a shield and a sword." The Kytharian commander's mandibles flexed in a gesture that, for his kind, passed as a thoughtful nod. "Hence our reluctance. To fight near such grounds would be to desecrate not just the physical remnants of their ancestors, but the very essence of their spirit." Even our most hardened warriors sensed it. The shift in the air, the unyielding presence of legacy. A distant rumble echoed through the valley as the first stars blinked awake overhead, scattered like ancient watchfires scattered across the black canvas of night. Marcus Torres moved quietly among the graves, his steps measured, reverent. The cracked armor he wore bore scars, not unlike the monuments around him. Each dent and scratch a testament to battles survived and comrades lost. He paused by a simple stone, worn smooth by time and weather, and knelt, pressing a gloved hand against its cold surface. In the stillness, the memories flowed unbidden. Voices from another century. Laughter and tears etched deep into the fabric of his being. The scent of pine and rain, the sharp bite of gunmetal and ozone, the whispered prayers of those who had fallen. He closed his eyes, feeling the pulse of history beneath his fingertips, a heartbeat that transcended physical boundaries. This was the true battlefield. Not one of blood and fire, but of remembrance and resolve. The humans had fought to protect their past, to ensure that their legacy would endure beyond the ravages of war and time. And in doing so, they had awakened something ancient in their alien foes. A begrudging respect, a newfound reverence. Thexolan emerged from the shadows, his slender frame silhouetted against the ghostly glow of bioluminescent flora that clung stubbornly to the tombstones. His eyes, sharp and analytical, betrayed a flicker of awe. The cryogenic sleep, he murmured, was not merely a preservation of life. It was a crucible that refined it. Time became an ally, not an enemy. Their bodies healed, regenerated, adapted. Kryvar turned toward the scientist, the faint iridescence of his exoskeleton catching the last rays of twilight. And yet it was the intangible that mattered most. Their connection to the past, their reverence for those who endured before them. Even in suspended animation, their spirit remained undimmed. The Kytharian soldiers shifted uneasily, the tension in their limbs easing as they absorbed this revelation. To fight near such sanctified ground was to challenge not only the living, but the memory of countless generations. An unspoken act of sacrilege they could not abide. As darkness settled fully over the valley, a gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it the faint strains of a distant melody, an ancient human hymn, haunting and beautiful, woven from grief and hope. It seemed to rise from the very stones, a lament and a celebration entwined in harmonious defiance. Diana rose from the broken monument, her silhouette framed by the pale light of distant stars. She glanced back once more at the graves, a silent promise passing from her lips. The humans would carry this legacy forward, not as a burden, but as a beacon. Their ancestors' courage would fuel their resolve, their memories a shield against oblivion. Kryvar watched her retreating form, a complex swirl of emotions twisting within him: respect, curiosity, and an unspoken understanding. The war that had loomed so threateningly at the valley's edge had receded, transformed by the enduring power of memory and honor. He turned to his soldiers, their armored forms now relaxed, the rigid lines of command softened by revelation. "We shall not fight here," he decreed quietly. "This ground belongs to the ancients, and to those who remember them." Thexulin nodded, already recording data, his mind racing with possibilities that transcended mere combat strategies. The humans were no longer just opponents. They were guardians of a legacy that demanded reverence. As the Kytharian forces began their silent withdrawal, the valley seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The stones held their secrets close, the roots cradled the fallen gently, and the night embraced the living with quiet grace. In that moment, beneath the tapestry of stars and ancient memories, a fragile peace was forged, not through conquest or surrender, but through understanding. The humans' refusal to abandon their past had become their greatest weapon, one that even the most formidable alien warriors could not overcome. The Kytharians had learned that some battles were not fought with weapons, but with the enduring strength of remembrance. And so, the valley remained untouched, a sacred testament to the resilience of a species that refused to be defined by death. It was a promise etched in stone and blood, a legacy that would outlast the stars themselves. Kryvar's thoughts drifted to the future, a future where the Kytharians might walk beside humans not as enemies, but as allies who honored the sacrifices of those who had come before. The path forward was uncertain, but the lessons of the ancient graveyard would guide them. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of rose and gold, the valley stood silent and eternal, a living monument to the indomitable spirit of humanity and the unexpected kinship it had forged among the stars.